Hey, what's up, fam? So this will be the second episode of my new kind of series that I'm doing. Who would win between fictional character A and fictional character B. I'm calling it Clash of Fiction. For the first episode, I did a match of explosive stealth fighters, Magna from Black Clover and Bakugo from My Hero Academia. This time, I'm going to be doing characters who are centered around the night and kind of this darker tone. That being Doryu, the ruler of the night from Ravemaster, leader of the Ghost Squad, against Ulqiorra Cypher, the fourth Espada. Now, I'm going to go over the rules really quick for this one before I get into the match itself. I'm going to eventually make a video just having the rules, and I'll just say, refer to the rule video for this. But for the most part, speed is going to be equalized. Characters are going to be kind of seen at the same level of speed, aside from abilities that are directly speed enhancement things. And I'd say that because speed feats can be very inconsistent throughout series, especially when it comes to mangas, to where you can get something that just so happens to have been crazy fast in one part, but it's not consistent with the rest of the series, and even stuff after that comes out slower. For a good instance is, there is one in Bleach where, in one of the data books, people take it very seriously that Ichigo's Bankai lets him move at lightning speeds, or it says that he gets to move lightning fast, so they just take his lightning speed. But where Gin, who says his Bankai is the fastest one, at one point he kind of describes it and he claps and he says, "Ichigo, did you hear that?" It's about 500 times that. So the guy with the fastest Bankai, stated by him, is his sword moves at around Mach 500. So there's like I said, a lot of inconsistencies and power level stuff, like in terms of destructive attacks and like defensive, durability based feats are much easier to for authors to keep consistent, whereas speed is kind of very inconsistent most of the time, unless they are. I know Toriko was really good on consistency with power level stuff, where the author paid a lot of attention to that kind of stuff. So yeah, for the most part, I'm going to keep speed just kind of equal. If a character has a speed increasing ability and the other one doesn't, it'll just kind of be an advantage that they're going to have. I'm not going to give it a different number. But otherwise, energy is also going to be equalized. So in this case, Doryu uses magic and Ulqiorra uses reishi. Those energies are going to be kind of put on the same level playing field. They're going to be treated as the exact same. Otherwise, you'd get stuff like no one would be able to see Bleach characters, or if you were, for instance, had someone from Bleach fight someone from Naruto, like Pain. I know one of the Pain Pass can absorb chakra-based attacks. So like, well, why can't he just ignore reishi attacks? Wouldn't the reishi attack like a Sero just kind of hit him? And it's like, well, it's not chakra, I can't absorb it. You treat those kind of like they're the exact same thing. But, that's a normal thing I know across, like, forums and stuff. Energy will be viewed as the exact same. Characters are also going to be in character. That is the third rule. They're going to be in the mindset of their third character. They're going to act like they normally do. The only thing exempt from that is anything that would kind of keep them from winning. And a good example of that would be Kumagawa from Medica Box, who literally, the thing in the series is he can't win fights. Like, if he's winning a fight and you tell him that he's winning, he has this, like, kind of joking thing where he'll just kind of pass out because it does a little bit of parody. Or, for instance, Sanji from One Piece, obviously he's fighting a girl, he would have one of his spasms and, like, nose bleed out, and by default wouldn't win just because of the way that is with his mind. Stuff like that, I'm going to completely take out of the equation. Anything that would make the fight itself a non-factor, really. The third rule, that was the third rule. Fourth rule is character power-ups, a power-up form, they're only allowed to use if they are accessible by themselves. So, again, for instance, Ichigo could use his Bankai all the time. Drop that anytime he wants. But something like My Hero Academia, Deku has that infinite 100% power-up use against Overhaul, but he was only able to use that because of Eri was, reverting back all the damage that he was taking, something that he can only currently achieve with aid of her, so he can't do that on his own, so it wouldn't be allowed in a match. And then the fifth rule is characters will fight until one is dead or unconscious. There are characters that are immortal, and you'll get people like, well, he'll get knocked out, but in X amount of time he'll get up and he'll keep fighting, or he'll outlive the guy just by standing there and not dying. Stuff like that. No, I'm not for that. Obviously, if the character's knocked out, rendered unconscious by means of someone else's attack, or one of his attacks maybe ends up landing him in a state where he's unconscious at that point, obviously the guy still standing would win. So those are the rules. We're going to get into the fights in just a second. So get ready for a match between bat kind of darkness based characters. This is going to be good. Alright, so first out of the two, I'm going to go with Doryu. So just kind of give a short brief discussion of his backstory. Doryu was this demon king. He was one of the lords of the mystic realm, which is pretty much the large spread name for where all of the creatures within the Rave Master world that are humans kind of live. And he had forsaken his title as a demon lord and all his power and kind of like the night that powered him, because he's kind of like a vampire. And he did it to try and live a life to bring together humans and the creatures that are his species, what are called Centenoids. And he spent years and years trying to save up money and build connections and get people interested in this idea. Eventually he was able to do it, but due to unfortunate circumstances, a small scuffle between a group of humans and a group of Centenoids over two kids that were roughhousing, kind of playing, and one of them accidentally hurt the other. Some racial stuff went by, and eventually all the Centenoids were forced out of the town. Doryu obviously didn't want to abandon his dream and his goal, tried to stay, but they didn't want him to continue because he was the mayor at the time. They ended up imprisoning him, and he was just devastated that his people did that, and the town that he built kind of betrayed him in the end and locked him away in this cell for more than 100 days with no light and just sitting in the darkness. And he kind of just withered away until he found his Darkbring, one of the 5 main Darkbring of the Mother Darkbring Sinclair. His is being called Vampire, which gives him the power over gravity, so he can both push and pull things around him with gravity. Now this is including the point where he can lighten gravity up around him to increase his speed, repel attacks from him so sword slashes can't hit him. He can do it in a way, not the exact same. If you can imagine kind of like a black hole sucking things in, it's not necessarily a black hole, but it has kind of like the same it's like gravity sucking in effect, but it doesn't seem to do damage. It just kind of takes someone within it and then absorbs them and puts them somewhere else. So, but it can be negated and like kind of canceled out last second if you kind of get away from it. But besides that, for the most part, he's got mostly types of dark magic. And before I get into that, I want to say there's a whole thing in the Rave Master world that there's a list of magic element affinities, and you are extremely resistant to whatever element you have the same affinity of. And that's relevant to this fight and relevant to stuff that happened within Rave Master. So I'll get to that in a second. But so for his kind of main fighting style before he gets into being straight caster is he has 2 swords that are basically the same. One is I think it was called the Twilight Sword, and the other one is the Jet Black Sword. And what those do is any wounds inflicted by them get worse over time. And closer to the night, the more grievous the wounds get. So getting hit by those would eventually just get to the point where you would die from the wounds. And obviously there are more of a long-term dot and not so much as would be an instant get hit, worry about it kind of issue. Now for his spells, he has 3 ones that are of real significance. But for kind of the smaller ones, one is he has a bit of an image projection, kind of like a little... if you kind of imagine a Bleach, obviously, is a good example for Ulqiorra being this. Is kind of like that whole after image thing. You slash them and it's not really them. But he's got stuff like the first kind of big spell he really dropped was the spell called Nightmare Spread. And what this did is it was a kind of like a big AoE burst of dark magic, and it didn't just straight do damage. What it did is it covered a large area, and the darkness was absorbed into the target's body. And when it hit them, the the darkness kind of exploded from the outside, or from the inside out. This obviously is a more of a hacks, more of an internal damage ability, but it was countered by somebody who changed a person into a dark affinity magic user to where the darkness didn't affect them, didn't hurt them. And obviously this will play, that small aspect will play very much into it. And he's not very entirely spell reliant, he's also a pretty good swordsman. He fought King, the king leader of the demon card group, also known as his real name, Gale Raregroove, to a draw. It looks like they were both in their base forms, but it doesn't say so much as his level of power. Because after, if you read their fights, King, I'd say, is definitely stronger than Doryu. But obviously they won't fighting at their full power, but it's just more about his sword capabilities rather than his power capabilities. Now, but definitely his spells are his largest thing. After Nightmare Spread comes his Weighted Darkness, and his Weighted Darkness was significant because even if you have this resistance to dark magic, it did damage anyway because it was kind of this heavy sheer power move that had the power equivalent to a 400 megaton blast. Now obviously that's 8 times more than the SAR bomb. Very devastating. It's very powerful, and it's not only that it's a very powerful attack, it's in Doryu's base form, and it got reflected back at him, and he took the damage, shrugged it off, spit up a little bit of blood, and got more serious in the fight. And what's also useful about it is after it's not like he uses it and then it touches something and explodes. There's seems to be a small period of time where he can control it and damage anything that comes in contact with it, and he could freely choose where it goes and what direction it goes, and manipulate it in multiple ways. After that, he has, of course, his power-up mode. It calls his Demon Lord form, and with that, he is able to, get the normal increases in stats, strength, speed, durability. He's able to cast spells stronger and better, and it's not like his other spells were inferior. His Weighted Darkness had a little bit of a couple seconds of a cast time, but he was able to use the combination with his Dark Brain called, Vampire, to kind of push and hold people in place with their gravity so he could finish the spell and then try and hit them with it. But with his more powerful form, his Demon Lord form, he's able to use spells like his oddly named Evil Blizzard, which is a Dark Lightning spell, but it's called Evil Blizzard for some reason, and then his trump card, Schwartz End, which is kind of this large AoE attack that covers miles of range and was cracking and shaking apart this city. But for the most part, it is a hack spell, and what it did is it absorbs the life energy of everything around it. It's definitely more powerful than his Weighted Darkness, but the main focus of it is kind of getting over this area and slowly sucking in the life that it's affecting and life within its field of range. So it's going to be very important for his kind of end game. He didn't seem to have anything beyond that. That was his forbidden spell, one that was his big ace in the hole, his trump card, that ended up getting cut in half by Heart of Glory's Rune Save, the sword that can cut things that can't be cut. And obviously is a very big, effective spell in most fights, but really will it affect Ulqiorra? I'll have to get to Ulqiorra and discuss that in just a moment. So I'm going to finish up with Doryu, get over to Ulqiorra. Alright, so Ulqiorra Cypher, the 4th Espada, and the main one that Ichigo fought within the Hueco Mundo arc before he ended up going back to Karakura Town and getting in that kind of final battle he had with Aizen to get to his, his ultimate form, his Mugetsu form, and all that stuff. But anyway, Ulqiorra, 4th Espada, is also this bat-themed ruler of the night, dark being, a very, very cool character, very interesting, who stood out very much amongst the other Espada, because though his backstory seemed rather plain, it seemed more like he was just some hollow that was kind of wandering around Hueco Mundo, and he mostly saw other hollows that didn't look like him. While other hollows were mostly black, he was mostly white colored, and it kind of made him stood out until one day he ended up kind of being cursed with what his Espada kind of symbol is. His is emptiness, and what would kind of define his character being this more emotionally broken apart, emotionally stagnant, kind of unknown guy. And I would say before I get into him, he's arguably the strongest Espada. I'd say he's probably the strongest. And I know obviously the numbers play into things, but he's the only one that had a second form, and his second form was so drastically above the others, and he himself he had such a large amount of firepower. It was some of his inexperience with his fourth form is what puts it more arguable that he would be stronger than the Espada ranked higher than him. If he had full control over it, I think he would definitely be for sure stronger. So basically, with getting into some of his abilities, he's got the most basic hollow abilities, Rankar abilities, sorry. He's got his Bala, which is just this really fast little quick energy blast, doesn't do much. He's got his Sero, which is slower, but it's this pretty strong beam. He's got obviously he'll have a Grand Raise Sero, but he never really used it. It's in his arsenal, but it didn't really seem to be something he'd use in character. He's got his Black Sero that he uses in his first form Resurrection. He's got his Lanza. I can't remember how to spell it. I think it's Lanza de Rampalgo, I believe it's spelled. Just trying really hard to remember off the top of my head how his Lanza is, how it's pronounced. But pronunciation is important. It was a very powerful attack, very devastating. It's probably one of the biggest attacks in Bleach in terms of sheer AoE. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that really kind of came off as bigger in terms of mass area damage and sheer destructive size. Now, Ulqiorra was a very intelligent character. He didn't fall prey to similar to or if you took Byakuya and took away that whole thing, or if you kind of insulted his pride and his honor. Ulqiorra just seemed very cold, very tactical. Similar to Doryu, but Doryu having more of that kind of vicious, more deep-rooted anger to him, whereas Ulqiorra seemed to be much more level-headed, much more calm, much more serious at all times during fighting. He's also got abilities like he's got his Hero, his Garganta, ability to kind of open little portals that go between... I don't think he ever went to the Soul Society, but it definitely can, because I know it goes between the human world, the Soul Society, and Waco Mundo. He definitely should have it, so it's not a huge factor in this, but it is important. Now, he's also got small attacks. He's got his Light of the Moon, the little javelins. Not that important here, it's just the kind of a weapon he uses. And then when he gets to his second form, he seems to fight more with his hands and his long whip-like tail, and then goes to his Black Seros and his Lanzas. The problem though with his Lanza is he had very poor control. He couldn't really hit Ichigo from I think it was 50 feet away or so, which was is a bit of a problem with him in multiple theoretical fights. But he does have things that can kind of make up for not having the best control. He's got sensory abilities. He's got his Sonido for speed increasing. He's got his Hero for defense increasing. He's got low level regen, so he can regenerate non-vital organs. So when he gets his leg cut off, he can regrow his leg. He gets his arm cut off, he can regrow his arm. He's got his really high-level swordsmanship ability. He's fighting with Ichigo and able to kind of manhandle him. He's very powerful indeed. I would say that in terms of power, it really came down to him having control of his Lanza that would put him at top Espada. Obviously, Baragon is the weird kind of card within a lot of the Espada, but given the fact that Soiphone's Bankai was able to damage him pretty well before he aged the entire explosion, I would say that Ulqiorra's Lanza would probably kill him if he landed it, or at least was able to kind of catch him within the explosion. And Ulqiorra is definitely I'd say the most impressive out of the Espada. They're all, for the most part, they're all pretty cool, but I think Ulqiorra was the most enjoyable to watch do things. He had a lot of really cool parts to design, a lot of cool parts to his fighting style and the way he kind of analyzed things. He was very analytical. He was very intelligent of a fighter, and He's not someone to fall prey to stupid things. He seemed very serious. He knew when to try and get things done, when to make a tactical retreat, when he needed to make a retreat, when something had to be done, even if it was against his better interests. He's a very smart character. So that's kind of him in a nutshell. He's got, high firepower. He got regen. He's got all these basic kind of buff abilities. He's definitely got the more spammable attacks with his Ceros and Balas than Doryu's got. But we'll see how things go between the two of them. So I'm going to get into the conclusion and kind of what I think how the fight would go. Alright, so getting down to it, match between these two was very, very well matched in multiple areas. They both had good AoE. They both had, the basic speed, strength, durability, range, kind of enhancements and attacks that really would help them in this, as well as being skilled in close quarters combat and even sword fighting. The fact that they both have sword fighting as their main thing, and as they power up, they go more into kind of hand to hand, really kind of put them on a very even playing field, not only power-wise, but also kind of the way that they fight in general. And they have a very similar kind of vicious and smart way of fighting kind of style to them that put them to each other on a very close level. Now, there were multiple things that were both very good and very bad in their favor. Obviously, for Ulqiorra, so that with the way that dark magic, or magic in general, really works within Ravemaster is, like I said, the elemental affinities. You have a high level of resistance to whatever your affinity is. And with Ulqiorra, he would definitely be darkness. So obviously with me saying, like I said, energy is equal, so they would both be kind of apply to certain rules that their powers would kind of sit at, while having their powers on kind of like a level between the two series. So things like Doryu's Nightmare Spread, which is a very powerful hacks ability that, would do a lot of internal damage, be very detrimental to someone like Ulqiorra, wouldn't do really anything, because with that dark affinity that would, obviously would be set to him with energy equal, it wouldn't, would do no damage to Ulqiorra. But Ulqiorra also had something, the fact that he has regeneration. So with Doryu's two swords, his Twilight Sword, his Jet Black Sword, every time he would, inflicts a wound, it gets worse over time, gets closer to night, gets more grievous, gets more severe. With Ulqiorra's regeneration, as long as none of those slashes really hurt any vital organs, he'd be perfectly fine. Now, he had advantages as well, but he also had disadvantages. Now, between the two of them, Doryu towered over Ulqiorra in terms of durability. Now, when it came down to the attacks, I would say within the top three, number three, well, in terms of power, number three would be the Black Cero. Number two would be kind of a tie between Weighted Darkness and Schwartz, and from Doryu, because obviously Weighted Darkness, the 400 megaton blast of power, like condensed into this ball, is very powerful. Schwartz then obviously would be more powerful, but there was nothing really to go off of other than it was equal to or greater than that of Weighted Darkness. And then obviously the strongest in terms of power between the two of them easily was Ulqiorra's Lanza. I think it's Lanza de Ralpalgo, or I can't remember. I usually just refer to it as Lanza. So it's like a green lightning lance or something. Pretty cool name, but that was definitely the largest attack in terms of power. Now, Ulqiorra has very poor control over that. He couldn't hit Vastalore's Ichigo standing still from I think it was 50 feet away in the air. So it's not like he has to do this long, brought out kind of way to do it. The first way he did it, he claps his hands together and, bam, there was the attack. And then right after that, he just kind of had his hand open up and he just formed it. But the fact that he can't really hit it from close range like that is very bad. But he can't really do it even if he was standing in front of him just throwing it at the ground. Because one of the things that happened is when Vastalore's Ichigo used his Cero, his own Cero, it matched Ulqiorra's Black Cero. Now, they were obviously on the same playing field. And Ulqiorra, once he kind of got downed by Ichigo for a moment, Ichigo slashed him with the sword, got him on the ground. The wound healed almost immediately, so he was right back up to, full health. And he blasts Ulqiorra with his, his own Sero, the Sero that he just took. And it did very heavy, severe damage to Ulqiorra. He was torn apart. His lower body was gone. One of his arms were gone. He's bleeding profusely. He's got just one tattered wing left. He was pretty much done at that point. It would have taken him a long time to really get back up. Now he was able to regenerate, but it was after a good couple minutes and after a clear opening to where he would have died when it happened. And even after that, when he got back up, he kind of just died anyway. His body kind of fell apart. He kind of crumbled and turned to dust. He couldn't take it anymore. His body kind of started to fade away. So not only could he not take his own attacks, but that means he definitely can't tank one of Doryu's weighted darkness abilities. Now, he could definitely take Schwartz's End, because Schwartz's End, even though it should be at least equal to, arguably in terms of power, its main focus is in life draining, because it looks more like it affects the area itself and not so much as the people. Because even though it was kind of shaking and breaking up the floating city it was on, it wasn't like destroying the ground under it. It wasn't, blasting apart the people. It was affecting. It was draining the life from them, and it drained stuff from life in trees, but it didn't just instantly drain things from like humans. And Ulqiorra, obviously being a hollow, in a Ronkar, he has a much longer life than than a person, really, than a human. So that aspect wouldn't really do anything to him. But with the weighted darkness, especially with Doryu's ability to kind of stagger and hold people with his vampire Darkbring using, gravity, and the ability to manipulate his weighted darkness while it's still in the air, he would definitely be able to get off a hit. Now, like I said, Ulqiorra wouldn't be able to really take this attack, and even though they're matched in destructive capability, they're not even close to matched in durability. And like I said, Ulqiorra he can't match his own level of power in terms of durability. The same attack that his Black Sero matched from Vastalora's Ichigo nearly killed Ulqiorra from taking it. Whereas Doryu, who took the weighted darkness, like I said, 400 megaton blast, in his base form, got up, coughed up a little bit of blood, and kept fighting. And like I said, this was his base form. He's got his much more powerful Demon Lord form that he kind of just was up and perfectly fine at that point. So Doryu really does have him outmatched heavily in terms of durability and his ability just to kind of soak damage. And like I said, the largest aspect that kind of separates Ulqiorra from being what could have been the strongest the Espada was his poor control over his Lanza. If he had higher accuracy with his Lanza, it'd be a much different fight. But I believe definitely after kind of going through all this that Doryu would definitely come out on top between the two of them. And like I said, the largest factor easily was Ulqiorra's lack of control of his Lanza, and the fact that he doesn't even have close to as much durability as Doryu does. And he definitely outclasses him in multiple areas. Like, I would say even though Doryu matched King and Swordsman ability, Ulqiorra, I'd say, kind of just being able to swat away Ichigo in terms of kind of close range fighting to be a much better feat, since even though Gale Rare Groove was a really good swordsman, he focused more on the power of the Decalogue sword, the sword that he used and its abilities rather than straight swordsmanship. Though he was a good swordsman, it wasn't his main style of focus. He definitely used his Darkbrings more than just general swordsmanship. So, like I said, this fight, I would definitely say it goes to Doryu, and better luck next time, Ulqiorra. I might use you again, but you weren't winning this round. Unfortunately, you died and weren't able to come back even stronger after your fight with Ichigo. So, thank you very much. I hope you like this. Give me your opinions below. Tell me if you agree with me or you disagree with me. And whether or not you liked this matchup, whether or not you think it was cool, whether you liked either characters, if you learned anything new about these guys, if you're interested in them, maybe if you haven't read Ravemaster or haven't read Bleach, and maybe you aren't thinking about it, maybe ask a question, I'm glad to answer. Maybe check out my other videos. I do mostly manga and some comics, and I would really appreciate if you subscribe to my channel, maybe a thumbs up, and like I said, comment on this video. I really like to read the comments, but otherwise, thank you very much. Bye.